Hello, my name is Hannah Heaton, and I will be presenting to you a performance presentation based off of the composition Around Me that was actually written by myself as well. It's a solo violin work. The title that I would like us all to think about as we go throughout this presentation is What's Around Me in 2020? So just a little bit of background about Around Me. I have Dr. Serena Scibelli performing this piece for me today. The performance that is going to be shown to you, it was also my world premiere of the piece. And Serena and I both met at the Music by Women Festival, and this is where actually we were both connected to each other. We were able to talk and, collaborate on my other composition, Out of Reach. So Serena also asked me to write another piece for her upcoming album. Initially, I wrote an entirely different piece. It was a duo entitled For Serena. It was a violin and tenor saxophone piece, but the pandemic and the beginning regulations of social distancing prevented Dr. Scibelli from using it. So she instead asked me to write a work for solo violin for a newly inspired album theme, showcasing reflection through music during the 2020 pandemic. And thus, Around Me was created with this theme in mind. And my piece Around Me is now featured in Scibelli's album Reflections that was released in December of 2020. The whole objective of this presentation today is to bring any listener the awareness and how they can connect their own circumstances from the pandemic to my violin solo Around Me. With this in mind, we'll go ahead and listen to our first performance. Okay, so with the first performance in mind, we'll continue. We will now begin the breakdown and analysis of the 3 points from the performance by Serena Scibelli. So we had pauses in space, dynamics and musical phrasing, and musical development. So these three terms, or three sections of terms, they are musical definitions, and so I would like to go ahead and define those really fast for those of you who are not musicians and don't know really the relevance of these terms. So pauses in space is just referring to actual stop in sound, the pauses. There's no sound continuing, it's silence. And the space is referring to how long the note is held out, so that way we were able to comprehend what we're hearing because the note is lasting for a longer amount of time. Dynamics are referring to how loud or soft we're playing or singing, and the musical phrasing is the emotional kind of context that the player or singer will put into their music based off of how they feel. Musical development is just talking about developing a single melody or a single theme that we hear in music. We enhance it, we grow it, we spread it out, we make it something new while still relating it to the original melody. All right, so pauses in space. When we pause, we listen to the space and we become aware. To linger in silence before continuing to play, that is our pause. So we heard a lot of pausing throughout the piece where there was silence before Serena continued to play again. Playing notes detached was another example of our pause. It gives the illusion of a pause by stopping short the sound of the note, by kind of bouncing a little bit. The space was like a pause, but a little different, like we explained earlier. The space is the interval of time or distance between each new note that we hear. So the space is reflected in the long flowing lines. For example, the melody at the beginning was very long flowing notes. It allowed us to absorb the sounds fully because the note lasted a longer period of time. So when we are allowed a pause or space in the flow of music we listen to, we can more easily become aware of what we just heard and what's around us. The analysis of the dynamics and musical phrasing refers to the emotion that we hear in the music. Whenever we play or listen to music, the emotion is what actually we put into it, and the dynamics are what kind of reflects that emotion. So we are moved by the emotion we hear in music. It all is represented by the dynamics and musical phrasings. The emotion is helps in the process of becoming aware. Musical phrasing is the emotional input in music, like we explained earlier. So first we hear irrational emotion through the very sudden and loud passages in the beginning. We hear the melody and it's very soft, and then all of a sudden we hear this loud, fast passage that represents the irrational emotion of, what is this? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? And then next we see the emotion of realization through the sudden and interchanged dynamics from very soft to very loud all of a sudden with no really time to recognize. It's just very sudden dynamics. And then we see Serena growing louder and louder and louder until we hit our strongest peak, which represents the realization of the whole piece. Lastly, we see the emotion of authority through the last growing passage that's immediately followed by the soft reaffirmation of the beginning melody. So we end with a gentle, soft dynamic that represents our newfound awareness. And this kind of soft and loud, medium loud, building up, all of this is representing our emotions in the process of becoming aware. So for the analysis of musical development, we saw that the music never stayed the same. It never stayed on the same line or stayed on the same space of sound. It always was changing. So that is what we call musical development. It takes different sounds and makes it music. It organizes it into music. So the final idea of reflection is heard by the development of the melody itself. The musical development represents the growth. In the beginning, you're presented with the melody, and then you hear that melody develop. So I have here a few examples of the musical development. Some of you may have heard the changes, but maybe didn't know exactly how to put words to it. So I have a few examples below here. First, we have quicker notes in between the key melody. We heard the melody, and then we heard it again, but there were notes woven into that melody that were quicker. We repeated downward motion that moved by step or in order. We also had surprise changes that were similar to previous material, but were something that we weren't expecting. We had different registers, or just saying how high or low something is. We had very high notes, very low notes. Sometimes we were in the middle, things like this. We also had different harmonies. So harmonies are passages that are similar notes or melodies, but they're different quality. So we may have heard something that sounded sad in the beginning, but then later we heard it change to a more joyful tone. We may have heard something very angry and harsh, and then we heard it develop into something soft and delicate later on. So the analysis points, in summary, are talking about just the process of becoming aware through the pandemic. So the pauses in space give us that time to be aware. The dynamics and the musical phrasing are what represents the emotions we feel, and that all of those emotions are very real and very personal, and it's okay to express those emotions in however way we need to. And the musical development is representing our growth. So we don't always stay in our emotions. We continue to grow and grow and grow until we reach just this level of realization saying, it's okay, and I'm going to move on from this. So with that in mind, I'd like us to listen to this last performance. Okay, so now that we've heard a second time around me with this newly found idea of those three analysis points of pauses in space, dynamics in musical phrasing, and musical development, I want us to think about those experiences, those listening experiences with both performances, and answer these questions. Did you notice any differences in how you reacted? Could you identify with the three analysis points and how they connected with the music? After relating to the performance with our 3 points, in what ways did it cause new awareness for you that during the pandemic in 2020? Thank you so much for your time and attention. The name of my presentation was What's Around You in 2020, and my name is Hannah Heaton. Thank you.